when the Reverend Samuel Barnet and his wife moved to St. Jude's Vicarage in 1873. The previous incumbent was still in residence and too ill to be moved, so they were forced to take temporary lodgings nearby. The landlady had some careless habits. She apologized one day for not serving Mr. Barnet his usual rice pudding, as a mouse had drowned in it. Many years later, there was still a rasp in Mrs. Barnet's voice when she retold the story for her memoirs. Their church, St. Jude's, was an isolated and empty one. At the first Sunday service there was a congregation of 6 or 7 old women who all expected some dole for attending. The newly hired organist played tunes on a damp-stained piano, and Mrs. Barnet, who could not sing a note in tune, led the hymn-singing. Most of their parishioners had been lured away by the Sunday street market in Middlesex Street, Petticoat Lane, where card-sharps, thimble-riggers, and swindlers of all sorts, as well as men seeking casual work, went in their thousands, hoping to get enough money to see them through the week. Equally disgraceful to Mrs. Barnet were the herds of cattle goaded through the streets of Whitechapel each week to the slaughterhouses in and around Aldgate. Sometimes the horns would catch in the spokes of moving wheels, and the animals, maddened with pain and fear, would scramble onto the pavement, scattering the crowds. At the slaughterhouses, which were often ordinary shops, the sheep would be dragged in backwards by their legs, and the bullocks hounded in by dogs and blows, while small boys clustered excitedly round the door, and passers-by stepped as best they could through the blood and urine flooding the pavement. Mr. Barnet's parish was bounded by the city on the west and Whitechapel High Street, where there were 40 shopkeepers and their families, on the south. Apart from the lessees of some large warehouses in Commercial Street and several rows of well-kept cottages tenanted by Jews, the bulk of his parishioners were crowded into a network of courts and alleys, none of which was intersected by any roads. All these courts stank from the accumulated piles of rags and rubbish, and a miasma of liquid sewage that flooded the cellars of the houses. At the end of each court there might be a solitary standpipe, the only source of fresh water. Most of the rooms in these houses were let out to single families at 8d. a night. In 1883, the chairman of the London School Board reported that out of 3 schools with children from 1,129 families, 871 families had only one room to live in, and in the majority of cases the number of people sharing with them was as many as 5, and sometimes as high as 9. The broken windows were frequently stuffed with rags or covered with papers. They were rarely opened because of the smells outside, and because the wretches who lived there were badly clothed and couldn't be exposed to draughts. In Wentworth Street, a daily procession of wagons carted their uncovered piles of rubbish to the dust destructor, which Mrs. Barnet renamed the Dust Distributor because of the clouds of dust it vomited out and the way it choked the drains. In some cases, even such inadequate window repairs might be enough to justify the landlords charging an extra 3d. a week for rent. In the house at 35 Hanbury Street, typical of the parish, there were 7 people in each room, with adult sons and daughters sleeping on the floor. In none of the rooms was there more than one bedstead, and the only WC was on the ground floor. This was normally in such a filthy state that the tenants used their chamber pots, which, said the Reverend R.C. Billing, giving evidence to a House of Commons Select Committee, were left in the rooms for a very long time before being taken down and emptied in the yard. Staircase banisters had often been removed for firewood, and it was a common sight to see vermin-infested wallpaper hanging in strips.